And I appreciate the opportunity to contribute to this very important debate in an important week. And there's only just 2 points ahead of the European Council that I'd like to refer to, Lascain Corla. And the first is in relation to Russia's ongoing brutal war in Ukraine, and the very welcome news that the European Commission has, of course, recommended candidate status for not just Ukraine but also Moldova and Georgia. And I know the EU Affairs Committee are currently in Georgia, having previously visited Moldova a number of weeks ago under Deputy Joe McHugh. But I think we have to ask ourselves, what does that candidate status that the European Council is going to improve this week mean? What does that entail? You know, we're very good at showing demonstrable signs of solidarity, understandably, with the Ukrainian people. Every night, the House of Oireachtas is lit up brightly in the Ukrainian colours. We're flying their flag. We've contributed to Red Cross fundraisers. And indeed, the European Union has responded with six packages in terms of sanctions, as well indeed as financial and indeed lethal aid assistance, although I will state my regret that Ireland isn't part of the complete EU support for Ukraine, as I think this is a situation where we need to be practical about who our allies are, because let's be absolutely clear, Ukraine is fighting for all of Europe at the moment, and there is unfortunately a danger that the war in Ukraine, too many people in the West are simply becoming tired of it. They aren't paying attention that there is absolute savage fighting, continuous atrocities going on from Russian troops in parts of Ukraine still. Kyiv may no longer be under siege, but there are parts of Ukraine that are going through 9 rounds of hell at the moment, and we cannot take a backward step. So therefore I go back to my point, Lascain Corla, in terms of what is the tangible impact of candidate status for Ukraine. Because we know Ukraine's aspiration to join the EU is not a new thing, and there has been roadblocks in the way in terms of, be it of the rule of law or governance issues, but crucially in terms of finances and also the reconstruction of the country, reconstruction that is so important. And I look at one aspect in terms of what's been called at a European level a Marshall Plan for Ukraine. And I think this is something that needs to take action now, not something that is planned to happen in a couple of years' time, because as the Secretary-General of NATO said this week, this war unfortunately is going to be with us for quite some time. And I think if we look at the roughly 36 billion euro of Russian assets that have been freezed by European Union member states, including just under 1 billion euro by Ireland, these now need to be seized, Lascain Corla. They need to be seized and ploughed back into Ukraine. The ill-gotten bounty of Russian corruption and warmongering needs to be taken from the Russian leadership, from the oligarchs and stooges that surrounded Putin and tried to hide their money around the world, and ploughed back into rebuilding Ukraine, rebuilding the roads, rebuilding the schools, rebuilding the livelihoods and homes that have been robbed from the innocent Ukrainian people. When we talk about the 6 rounds of sanctions, and let's be frank, they are simply not enough. If there were enough, we had, at this stage, over 100 days since the outbreak of this latest iteration of the conflict, the Russian regime would be close to collapsing. But it's not, because it has so many outs. We can see how Russian oligarchs have been able to move their money away from London, away from Paris, away from Dublin, Brussels, wherever it is, to other outposts of the world that simply are not taking the same approach to Vladimir Putin and his despotic regime's invasion of Ukraine that right-thinking countries in the EU, in the UK, in the United States, in Japan, Australia, Norway and elsewhere are. And that's where I think, Minister, it is absolutely crucial at the European Council that the European Union starts to apply pressure as a global leader. The European Union is a global leader when it comes to the economy, when it comes to democracy, values and social. But what are we looking at our partners? The countries around the world who have very lucrative trade deals, partnerships and so much else with the European Union, who rely on their partnership with the European Union in so many areas, but yet they themselves are seeing no problem with facilitating Vladimir Putin, his oligarchs and his regime's ability to get around European sanctions to their own countries, to their own banks. And I think that's something that we need to start seeing the EU show its teeth. We can't simply just rely on the US to be putting in huge amounts of money if we're not prepared as the EU, who have the power to do this, to look at other countries, be it the UAE, be it India, be it other countries, and say their continuing ability to facilitate this Russian regime simply is not acceptable. One issue, Lascain Corla, that should be on the European Council agenda, but probably only be referred to in the margin notes, I suppose, as a standalone issue, is once again we see the British government acting absolutely deplorably when it comes to their international commitments and their international agreements signed not very long ago with the European Union. The trade and cooperation agreement that is so important to Ireland economically in terms of ensuring that our exporters have continuing access to the UK, but equally that so many people can continue to bring in, without the burden of tariffs or quotas, goods from the UK, is under threat due to the United Kingdom's inability to meet their commitments to the protocol. And when I say meet their commitments, I'm not talking about the rigorous implementation trope that's thrown back at European and Irish leaders by certain unionist commentators, but I'm talking about the ability of the British government to not just meet their commitment, but to meet their commitment in terms of the engagement of the Joint Implementation Committee of this withdrawal agreement. The fact that the Foreign Secretary has withdrawn from that implementation committee since the 24th of February tells an absolutely sorry tale. The European Union, through Vice President Šefčovič, has presented a comprehensive set of proposals to address the accepted difficulties in terms of the operation of the protocol. We have not seen anything in return from the British government, and rather than engage in the process, we've seen a Foreign Secretary putting her own political ambition first, upping stumps and simply disengaging in the process, and coming back rather than with a comprehensive plan of acceptable solutions and an ability to work through the obvious problems identified by business leaders in Northern Ireland, but simply putting the wrecking ball through an international agreement. It is the British government's continuing recklessness that is causing instability in Northern Ireland. The problem is not the protocol, it is Brexit. And we have a British government who've decided the solution to all the problems that they have created with their nonsensical Brexit is to act unilaterally and to threaten to break international law, to use Northern Ireland as some sort of a bargaining chip in the internal power play of Conservative politics and of British government distractionary techniques for the next time there is an awkward Partygate scandal, there's a fuss about rendition flights for refugees to Rwanda, and appointments and potential by-election defeats, rail strikes and everything else. And it's absolutely retrograde step, Blascan Corler, that, to be honest, after 6 years, I am absolutely, would you believe it or not, sick of talking about Brexit. We need to move on. Europe needs to move on, Ireland needs to move on, but most importantly, the people of Northern Ireland need to be given the chance to move on and endure and enjoy some element of stability that this British government is failing to deliver. Gurmaga.